In the last video, we talked about evaluating simple equations, and this video is just an extension of that. We're just going to focus specifically on the simple interest formula, which is I equals PRT. And then over here, we've got what all of the variables stand for. So I is interest in dollars, P is the starting amount or principal, that's also in dollars, R is the annual interest rate, which we always write as a decimal. And then time is always in years, so that's an important one to remember. So this first example, evaluating formulas, example 4, we're going to use the formula I equals PRT with the given values, and we're going to solve for I. So to do that, I'm just going to rewrite the formula. So I equals PRT, and I'm going to plug in what I know. So P is 3,000, so I plug in 3,000 for P. R is 0.032. Time is 20 months. We're going to find I. So 20 months. So I just mentioned above, time always needs to be in years. So if you're given months, then we need to convert that to years. So let's think about how we do that. Well, there are 12 months in a year. So 20 months, if I divide that by 12, then that will give me the number of years. And I can write it just like that, or I can put it in my calculator, 20 divided by 12, and get the decimal. Now notice when I get the decimal, it's a repeating decimal. So if I were to round this, if I were to just use 1.6, let's say 7, that would be the rounded version. So I actually prefer to just use the fraction. So in general, the number of years is going to be the number of months divided by 12. So in the formula, I'm just going to put in 20 divided by 12. That way I don't have to worry about rounding or anything. And so then I'm going to just plug that all in my calculator. So I'm just going to do 300, or 3,000 rather, times 0.032, or I could have put a 0 in the front there, it really doesn't matter. And then this last fraction, you can either use the fraction button if you have it, if you have a calculator like this, so you could write it like this, or I'm just going to show you another option. You can just do 20 divided by 12 if you don't have the fraction button. Either way will work. So it's really easy actually to enter in a fraction in your calculator. So I wouldn't be afraid. So we get 160, which is dollars. So basically what this means is that if we, let's say we invest $3,000 at a rate of 0.032 for 20 months, then the interest that would accumulate would be $160. In this next example, example 5, we need to talk about what to do, how to handle the interest rate before we jump into these ones. I briefly mentioned it before that the R in the formula is always a decimal equivalent of whatever the percentage is of that rate. And so if you're ever given a percentage, say you're given the percentage 12.3%, that's the rate. When you use the formula, you must first convert that percent to a decimal. So for example, 12.3% is converted to 0.123. And just a quick review, all you have to do is take the decimal and move it 2 places to the left to convert a percent to a decimal. And so if you are getting an answer for R, so you're solving for R, so this would be in a different scenario, then you're going to convert that answer back to a percent before rounding and giving a final answer. So let's do a couple of examples so that you understand what I mean. So in A, I'm going to start just by writing down the formula. So I equals P times R times T, and I'm going to plug in what I know. So my principal is $3,000. And the interest rate is 3.4%. So I'm going to just write that down and move that decimal 2 places to the left and put a 0 in for a placeholder. And that gives me 0.034. And my time is in years, so I don't have to do any converting there. And so then all I have to do is plug this in my calculator. So 3,000 times 0.034 times 2, and that gives me 204. Okay, and since I'm solving for interest, that's dollar amounts. So that would be the interest earned if you invested $3,000 at 3.4% for 2 years. So for B, do the same thing. So I write down I equals P RT. I plug in what I know, so the interest is 2,300. So I put that in for I equals, now it tells me at the end I'm solving for P, so I'm going to leave P there. The interest is 5%, so I take 5, move my decimal 2 spots left. It gives me 0.05, and time is 4 years. Now, because I have two numbers that are multiplied next to P, I'm going to multiply those first, so 0.05 times 4. And so I'm going to rewrite this equation as 2,300 equals 0.2 times P. So just to clarify, I took the 0.05 and 4 and I multiplied those together in the calculator, and I decided to write those before the P just because it's more customary in math to write the coefficient first. And now I'm going to solve for P by dividing both sides by 0.2. Since dividing and multiplying by 0.2 cancel each other out. And so my final answer is just going to be 2,300 divided by 0.2. And so it looks like my final answer, and again, this is P since I'm solving for P, so my principal is $11,500. So that means that if I invest $11,500 at 5% for 4 years, then the interest will be $2,300. Okay, so last one. So in this case, I'm going to write down my formula again. I equals P R T. My interest is $12,000. My principal is $11,150. My rate I'm trying to solve for, so I'm not given the rate, so that's how I know I need to solve for it. And then the time is 4 years, so I put a 4 there. Just like the last one, I've got two numbers and then a variable on the right hand side. Multiplication is commutative, which means you can multiply in any order. So even though these two numbers are not right next to each other, we can multiply those together. It's kind of like if I have 2 times 3 times 5, that's the same thing as 2 times 5 times 3. I can rewrite that however I want, and I still get the same answer. So we're going to go ahead and just put that in our calculator. So 11,150 times 4, okay, and then that gives us 44,600. R equals 12,000. And just like the last problem, I decided to write that coefficient first. And then R second. And then I'm going to solve this by dividing both sides by 44,600. And so I'm just in my calculator going to do 12,000 divided by 44,600. Okay, and it looks like I've got my rate, which is a decimal, so my rate is 0.269058 ... And so now I want to I'm asked to find this rate as a percentage, and so I need to round after. I need to round because the decimal goes on forever, but I need to first convert it to a percent and then I'm going to round. So in terms of the rounding, we were given those directions at the very beginning, so round all answers to the nearest hundredth. So I'm going to keep that in mind, and I'm going to first convert this to a percentage. So I'm going to take the decimal and I'm going to move it 2 spots to the right. That's just opposite of what we were doing before, going from percent to decimal. Now we're going from decimal to percent, so I move the opposite direction. So that gives me 26.9058. I usually keep a bunch of numbers there, and then I can go ahead and round. And so it asks to round to the nearest hundredths place, which would be where this 0 is. So the next number is 5, so that means I bump that up to a 1. So 26.91% is going to be the rate for that investment. In this last example, we're going to look at a different type of simple interest formula. It's the future value formula, and it's this formula right here. So A stands for future value, and then P is still principal, rate is R, T is time in years. And this is a formula. It's similar to the last one we were using, but this is helpful when you either know the future value or you want to know the future value, which is the money that you earn in the end after investing. So let's jump into A. So we're given the formula, and I'm going to write it down again. So A equals P times 1 plus RT, and I'm going to plug in what I know. So we're told P is $3,050. 1 plus, the rate is 2.4%. So just like that last formula, the rate needs to be as a decimal when you plug it into the formula. So 2.4%, I move that decimal 2 places to the left, and I get 0.024. So 0.024, and then time is 15 years. So I say times 15. Now this is the easiest kind of evaluating because I don't have to solve, I just plug that in my calculator. So I can do that all at once, just typing it in exactly how I have it written here. You can also do this step by step if you want to do the inside first. That would be okay too. And so we end up getting A equals $4,148. So what that means is it means that if you invested $3,050 at a rate of 2.4% for 15 years, in the end you would have $4,148. So unlike the last equation where you would solve just for the interest, this adds everything together so you know that total. Okay, so let's look at B. So I'm going to write down my formula. A equals P times 1 plus RT. Now this time I know the future value, so I'm going to plug that in for A, 50,000, equals P is 45,000 times 1 plus 0.04 times, use a different color so we can really see that there. We're solving for T. We don't know what T is. And so in this case, we've got a couple of options here. You could divide both sides by 45,000, or you could distribute the 45,000 inside the parentheses. And so, there's not one right way to go about doing this. It really just, it's personal preference. So I'm going to distribute. So 45,000 times 1 is just 45,000 plus, and then we've got 45,000 times 0.04t. So I'm going to multiply the numbers, 45,000 times 0.04. That first 0 isn't necessary, so I don't need to type that in. So I get 1,800 t equals 50,000. And then I've got a choice here. I've got to get t by itself, so I'm going to get rid of that 45,000 first by subtracting it from both sides. We're doing the opposite of the order of operation. So we always get rid of adding and subtracting before we get rid of multiplying and dividing. So those just cancel. And then on the left-hand side, I have 50,000 minus 45,000. So that's just 5,000 on the left, and then 1,800 t on the right. And so now all I have to do is divide both sides by 1,800. So 5,000 divided by 1,800, and I'm left with t equals 2.777. So those are repeating there. And we're asked in the beginning, let's just look at the rounding direction. So round money answers to the penny. So that doesn't apply here because this is time. And other answers to the tenth. So I'm going to round this to the nearest tenth place. So I'm going to say t is approximately 2.8, and this would be years since time is always in years. Okay. And then for C, so I'm going to start off the same way I did before. A equals P times 1 plus RT. Now in this one, we're finding P. So P is what we don't know. So A is $230. And then 1 plus our rate is 0.04. So that's nice. They already converted that to a decimal. And then time is 20 years. And so with this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify the inside of the parentheses first, because notice those are all numbers. There aren't any variables in there. So I can just plug that all into my calculator first. And so I get 1.8. So that means I've got P times 1.8 equals 230. If you want to rewrite it as 230 equals 1.8p, since it's customary to put coefficients in front first, you can, but it doesn't matter. You can also leave it how I had it. And then we're going to divide both sides by 1.8. So we're going to do 230 divided by 1.8 in the calculator, and that gives us P equals 127.7, we'll say repeating, and then let's refer to those directions again. Since this is principal, and I believe, so that would be a money answer, we're going to round to the nearest penny. So that would be 2 digits after the decimal place. So that would be principal is approximately $127.78. since this repeating would be like lots of 7s. So that would tell us to bump the 7 up to an 8. Okay, so last example. I'm going to start with my formula. A equals P times 1 plus RT. And our principal is $2,000 times 1 plus our rate we're trying to find. So I'll just put that in red. And then time is going to be 3. So times 3, okay, equals $2,300. Now, the last one that was set up like this, I decided to distribute that outside number to the parentheses. And this one, I'm going to do it a little differently. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2,000. Distributing would be absolutely okay. And if you are thinking that you would rather distribute, then this would be a great time to stop the video and do it using the distributive property, and you'll see that hopefully we get the same answer. And so if I divide both sides by 2,000, then that just goes away. So on the left, I get 2,300 divided by 2,000 equals, and so on the left hand side I get 1.15 equals, and on the right 1 plus r times 3, or I could write it 3r. And so then I'm going to subtract 1, since I always get rid of adding and subtracting before multiplying. And so 1.15 minus 1 is just 0.15 equals, we'll call this 3 times r. And so then I'm going to divide both sides by 3 and then just use my calculator. So 0.15 divided by 3, and I end up getting a rate of 0.05. And then this is asking for interest rate. And since this is interest rate, we're going to convert this to a percentage by moving that decimal 2 spots to the right. So our rate is 5%.